The 40,000 square kilometer wilderness region of the Iceland Highlands is being actively developed for the first time in history. Corporate hydro interests view the desert wasteland as a gold mine. With so few truly untouched areas left of the world, Iceland is abundant in nature and open spaces. An organized conservation initiative is attempting to establish a national park that would protect the highlands. Our goal is to trek across the entire country, capturing ourselves as we navigate through the highlands self-supported so we can share what's at risk of being lost forever.
Arriving in Reykjavik was really special. Hailey and I had been there a couple times in Iceland, and we fell in love with Iceland the first time we'd ever experienced it. We flew to Akureyri, which is about a 30-minute flight.
Just the scale of the landscape and seeing it from the air, knowing what we'd be walking through was a little bit daunting for me. It looked as if snow was everywhere. The glaciers were massive and the scale just seemed totally enormous. Our route started in Akureyri, in the northern region of Iceland along the shores of the Greenland Sea. Once we arrived in the small town of Akureyri, we finalized our gear for the 100th time, knowing that the next time we put our packs on would be the last time we have access to anything besides what we bring with us for the next 14 days. Walking along paved road for 42 kilometers on our first day didn't exactly feel like the wild and untouched landscape that we came for. However, we had the idea to start at the coast and work for the journey into the highlands. Starting any other way just wouldn't have been as rewarding. Every step is a struggle. It's so hard. My backpack was feeling so heavy, I couldn't wait to find somewhere to pitch our tent.
We made camp after what was a brutally long day of just slogging slowly uphill.
I was so excited to finally get some rest and call it a day.
Second day was a lot more of the same. It was a lot of slogging up, just eventually getting to higher elevation and finally getting into what was the beginning of the highlands.
Transition from town to rural farmland to wilderness was entirely worth the extra kilometers on our feet. Finally, we felt the slow incline underneath our feet as we began ascending into the highlands. That's really when everything sunk in for me and I realized we were going to be away from civilization and anything we're familiar with, and it was going to be a completely different world.
Once we got up to elevation, just changed completely from such a hospitable area and livable place to what was just seemingly like a completely inhospitable environment. I never before in my life felt like I was literally standing on the moon.
We were completely alone and it felt incredibly barren.
Because the route that we had created was so difficult to find any information on, it was really tough to get an actual distance or even an estimate of the amount of kilometers that we would have to travel. So we had assumed that we would be crossing somewhere between 250 and 280 kilometers from the north coast to the south coast. We had grossly underestimated our total distance for what this trek was going to be.
Oh, that's the like tomorrow's going to be.
So that night we got into our tent and we looked at everything. We looked at our map, we looked at our total distance, and we kind of re-estimated what the total distance would be. And ultimately we doubled our expectations, and we had a decision to make at that point. So our first option was to quit. I don't even know if we had said anything to each other or if it was just this feeling that we had just shared, that I think we just instinctively knew that there was no way that we were not going to finish this expedition. We had just decided out of the two options between rationing food or between pressing on and covering as much distance as we could as quickly as possible. We just knew that we had to just put our head down and just cover that distance and just do everything we can to be able to move forward and to carry out our objective no matter what.
We decided at this point that we earn our stories now, and we headed into the heart of the Highlands. We were completely on our own, self-contained, and self-reliable, no matter what. A warden in the north reminded us that hikers go missing every year in the Highlands because of poor decision-making. Make smart choices and stay alive, she said. We spent the next week moving through the remote and completely desolate Highlands region. We watched the sun set and rise as we walked along ancient glaciers while navigating black sand deserts and weathering intense Arctic storms day after day. The journey was filled with long days, little rest. Our shoulders constantly ached and our feet were completely swollen. It really wasn't getting any easier.
I think one of the most sobering moments for me was when we were about 5 days into our trek and we were stepping right into the belly of the Highlands, and we were really as about remote as we were going to be for the next 3 days of the entire expedition. It was really all coming together at once. The weather started changing. This ominous feeling that I had kind of laying in the pit of my stomach was almost mirrored with the environment outside.
I think the time that I was most in over my head was crossing a glacial river at 2 a.m. in the morning when it was pouring rain, and I just wanted to be somewhere warm and dry, and I was genuinely scared.
Couldn't have planned for the amount of rivers that we were going to have to cross. We couldn't have anticipated how cold that they were going to be that day.
We were freezing. We were tired. We knew that once we crossed those rivers, we'd be able to get someplace warm and dry off. We were extremely motivated to cross the rivers and get to the mountain hut.
I never felt like such a weight lifted off of our shoulders when we finally saw that hut. We just left the hut and continued deeper into the Highlands, just feeling so rejuvenated once again by just the simplicity of having shelter.
There were a couple moments where I felt completely at peace and just could not believe the sights that I was seeing in front of my eyes.
We were the only two people on Earth to be experiencing those places and to seeing that environment in the way that we were seeing it at that time. There was no one else on the planet that could appreciate where we were or what we were doing. It was just Hailey and I, and it was so cool. And as much as it was scary to be so remote and further out there than we had ever been, it was also incredibly powerful and moving to know that it was just us being able to experience this incredible place for what it was and to see it at its most raw form. Today has been just absolutely perfect. It's been beautiful. It's been really enjoyable, so we've just slowed it down. After days of walking through Iceland's wilderness and really connecting in a really tangible way with the environment and the landscape there, to come over this hill and to see nothing except for hydropylons dot the skyline and completely cross the horizon from one end to the other as far as the eye can see. It was really a sobering moment.
Coming into this, after being for a week straight in pure wilderness, is so difficult.
We're still over 100 kilometers away from the coast. There's zero towns, villages, or anything for another 100 kilometers, but there's 100 kilometer plus of just hydropylons. It was really difficult to see the hydro development get a grip on the highlands and start to overtake it so quickly. So the largest threat that the highlands of Iceland are facing currently are the hydro plants and hydro infrastructure, as well as development that comes along with that infrastructure, such as maintenance roads, hydro pylons, and damming rivers. It's critically important that that doesn't happen because the highlands are one of the last intact blocks of wilderness left here on the planet.
The sand, the wind, and lack of shelter in the highlands made it impossible for Ryan to take care of the blisters on his feet. He taped them up tightly and waited until we were in Landmannalaugar to look at them. Ryan and I sat in our tent and began unraveling the tape protecting his toes for days and hundreds of kilometers. As the tape came off, the smell hit us before the sight of the blisters did.
We spent 2 days in our tent just recovering, staying off of our feet.
All right, it is day 10 on the trail and day 2 in this tent. It's pretty crazy going from like sensory overload to like sensory deprivation and just being like basically confined to like a 4x2 space.
With a partner.
With a partner. Yeah, it's leaves much to be desired for sure.
Whoa.
Not the partner part, but the room part anyways, definitely like.
We were in so much pain for so many days and already achieved so much more than we ever had in our lives. Walking our first marathon distance, our first ultra marathon distance, and then our first 100K, 200K, 300K while on this journey. There's no way we could quit now.
Oh, it feels so good to be moving and on trail this morning.
Trekking through the Southern Highlands breathed a new life into us. The ever-changing landscapes, being surrounded by other energetic hikers in less remote areas on softer terrain was the medicine that we needed. Everything just came together for us. We felt like we had a second wind. We were much more inspired now than ever to get to the coast as quickly as possible. The thought of touching salt water and accomplishing our first objective, crossing Iceland, was within our reach.
We were in pain that we had never experienced before, but we're also experiencing highs and enjoyment in nature that we had never experienced before. The two just really went hand in hand, and I don't think that we could have enjoyed Iceland the same way had we not have earned it and experienced the lows in such a deep way that we did. It also just made all those peaks and all those highs just so much higher.
The last few days were cold and wet, but the smell of the ocean was beginning to fill our nostrils.
Can't even believe we made it this far.
Wilderness is embedded in us. Being in the wild allows us to reconnect with our roots and find ourselves. Without wilderness, we have nothing left to discover. With so few wild spaces left, it's more important now than ever to protect places like Iceland's Highlands. Pouring rain this morning, like heavy rain, and we're still going to the coast. If we've learned anything on this trip, it's that literally nothing can stop us. So here we go. What if we all come together to protect what's left? What if you pushed your boundaries and stood up for something you care about? What if we could actually save the Highlands? How will you fight?